people, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to compare these two divers. On the left is the Invicta Pro diver. This one 40mm, represented by my very favorite blue 9094 model. Review ages and ages ago, but it's still one that I like very much and is still in regular rotation through my wrists. And on the right corner I have what is a very recent review. I reviewed this not so long ago. It's the Parnis PA6007, and this one, again, shout out to Mike, a fellow viewer who has kindly sent me this to feature and review and compare on the channel. He's lent this to me very kindly, so a quick shout out to Mike again for lending me and making this watch available. So guys, these two divers are two kind of budget range divers, right? I think there's no doubt they are in kind of the budget range around $100 or less. They are from two brands which are at times controversial. You know, I think that's not an unfair thing to say. Invicta has its fair share of controversy, as does Parnis. You know, Parnis being a Hong Kong/Chinese company, which does a lot of homage style watches, but this one is less of an homage watch. This one is more of an original design, I think, from them. So they both have steel cases, 316L steel cases. They both have screw-in case backs, right? Just show you the case backs there, right? Screw-in. This one is the display, the Invicta, the typical Invicta display case back. They both have 120 click unidirectional dive style bezels and screw-in crowns, and they both have relatively poor lume, right? So how does the very popular Invicta Pro diver fare against the much newer Parnis offering? You know, I'm just very keen to do this comparison. MSRP wise, $315, but typically the sale price is around $70 or even less. This one MSRP is less. It's actually $205 MSRP, but the typical sale price is actually a bit more than the Invicta. It's about $100 is the typical sale price for this Parnis diver. So let's get into the categorical comparisons that I have here. So first up, caliber. Okay, so this one I think is pretty straightforward. The Invicta has the Seiko NH35A. The Parnis has a Miyota 8 series movement, A215 or A21A. I'm not exactly sure which variation, but essentially it's a Miyota 8 series. I think there's no doubt the Seiko is a little bit ahead. The Miyota doesn't have hacking, has a lower jewel count. Overall, I think in the community, the NH35A is seen as slightly better than the Miyota 8 series. So 7 versus 6 is the mark that I've given here. Okay, moving on then, case and bezel. Okay, so case design, I think clearly the Invicta is highly derivative, right? It's very much an homage watch, homage style type of watch, diver, oyster bracelet, and kind of this oyster case style here. The Parnis, on the other hand, I think is a bit more original. Yes, there are some elements which will be derived from other brands that you can spot, but I think it doesn't exactly copy the overall look of any specific watch. I may be wrong, but there is nothing I'm aware of that this has specifically copied. So, you know, I think the case design, possibly you have to give the slight edge to the Parnis, but I would say the Invicta bezel is actually slightly better in terms of the feel. This one feels a bit tinny. I'll just let you hear it. Okay, it's actually a little bit of a tinny feel to it. It feels very light. There is play on it. Okay, so I think the bezel quality is not as good on the Parnis, whereas Invicta, you know, typically they make it pretty solid. You know, there is a little bit of play, but less so, and it's just tighter. I think the overall bezel fit is just slightly better on the Invicta, so I think it evens out. You know, 8 each for the case and bezel category here. Moving on next. Okay, dial and crystal. Okay, so the dial, you know, I think Invicta clearly, again, is a very derivative. Even, you know, some people would say it's a stolen design, right? It's stolen from Rolex, that kind of Submariner dial. The Parnis is more original, and hopefully you can see there is a nice gentle wave pattern on here. Let's just see if I can show it. If not, take a look at the original review for more looks on the Parnis watch here. You know, I think it's a nicer job. You know, it's got I think nicer markers, just the marker design and the placement there. It's more original. The Invicta, in terms of crystal, is mineral glass versus the Parnis. It gives you a flat sapphire crystal. I think there's no doubt I have to give the nod to the Parnis in this category in Darwin crystal. So 8 versus 7. So 8 for the Parnis, 7 for Invicta for this particular category. You might argue maybe even a bigger spread, but this is what I've chosen to give in terms of the marks here. Moving on. Okay, Bracelet. Now, I think the Invicta finishing and feel is actually slightly better. The finishing is a little bit finer. The transitions are better from brush to polished. The overall fit is a bit better. So you know, I think I have to give it to the Bracelet, despite you know, that being hollow end links. Overall, I think the quality is better. This one, yes, it is just pressed metal, right, with friction release, but you know, it's done in a not bad way at all. You know, it fits and it does the job. Whereas the Parnis, the finishing is not as good. Okay, it's a little bit more wavy. You can criticize the brushing. The transitions are just not as sharp when I look at it closely. And you know, whilst this is more solid, these arms here, the overall, you know, fit is just a bit looser. I don't know if it's hard to describe that, but there's a looseness to the fit here, as well as the links that is not there in Invicta. Invicta is just that much tighter. So because of that, I think the overall quality is not as good, even though they're giving a slightly more solid job here. I have to give the nod to the Invicta for the Bracelet mark here. So 7 versus 6 is what I've gone for on the Bracelet category. Moving on then, okay, quality. All right, overall, again, I think the Invicta case, let's see if I can demonstrate, you know, the transition between the brushing and the polished surfaces, the fineness of the brushing. Again, I've mentioned the bezel feel already. It's actually very perceivably superior. You know, in hand here, you know, it's probably very difficult for me to show that the brushing on the Parnis is just not as good. The transitions are not as sharp, right, between brush and polished surface here. They've gone for the polished bevel type of this case with brush side here, but the transitioning is just not as good a job. You know, surprisingly, Invicta continues to be quite, you know, quite a good quality. It holds up to closer scrutiny better than the Parnis does. So, you know, I think in this case, I have to give the nod on quality to Invicta. The Parnis also has a QC issue on the minute hand. There's a bit of a blemish in there, which is clearly a QC issue, right? It wouldn't be any retailer that has opened this to expose that hand. That has to be out of the factory, right? There's an imperfection on the lume surface of that minute hand there. Hopefully that's perceivable to you guys. All right, so nod to Invicta on quality. 7 versus 6 is what I've gone for in this category here. Style, okay. This one's difficult. Okay, Invicta, you could argue some people would knock marks off because it is such a copy in terms of the style and the design. For me, it's difficult to separate. If I just ignore the fact that Invicta has taken its design from elsewhere, I think they are both pretty good looking divers. The Parnis is bolder and bigger for sure. It's 43mm versus 40, so it's definitely larger and bolder. The Invicta is a little bit more quiet, but I think in terms of overall looks and style, I like them both very much. I can't separate them in terms of one that I like better. This one is the most subjective category, of course. I've given 8 out of 10 for both of them on the style category. Moving on then, guys, performance. Okay, so they both have a 200-meter water resistance, the same water rating. They have similar lume performance. Neither of them are superb. You know, Invicta, you know, I've complained of their trip night plenty. Parnis doesn't say exactly what lume they use, and it doesn't last through the night. They're both about the same. Invicta has marginally better bezel feel, but I can't separate them from performance-wise. Otherwise, you know, I've given 7 out of 10 for both 200-meter divers. They kind of function as advertised. Durability. Okay, so in this case, I've left Invicta at 7, the same mark I've given before. It's pretty solid. It's a pretty good 316L steel case, right? You know, no major complaints in terms of what you're getting for the money here for Invicta. But I think the Parnis being bigger, substantially heavier, 43mm in terms of the case size, the weight. It's a pretty solid case. It's got the sapphire crystal. It's got what I think in some listings is ceramic for the bezel. That's yet to be confirmed, but if it's sapphire, ceramic, and a bigger case, no doubt I have to give the durability to Parnis here, 8 versus 7. I think that's fairly objective, not that controversial, I think, for this particular category. Moving on then, guys, value, nearly there. Value, right, Invicta 9 is the mark that I've given before. It is nearly unparalleled in terms of what it gives you for value, right? The steel, the quality of the finishing, the Seiko movement, you know, everything that it gives you for the $70 odd that you pay, sometimes 65. It's really nearly unparalleled. I rarely see anything that comes close to Invicta. 9 out of 10 for Invicta for me, but I gotta say, this watch gives a very, very compelling fight, right? You know, the fact that it's given a pretty solid case, right? Not as well finished, but pretty solid. The movement is marginally inferior, I think, in to 8 series, but the upgraded materials of the sapphire with the ceramic bezel, I think you can't ignore that. Yes, it costs about $30 more, but you know, despite all that, the fact that it gives you all those features, I've got to give it a very high mark. I've given it 8 out of 10 for the Parnis. I think the Invicta still takes it, in my opinion. Again, slightly subjective, but I've given 9 versus 8 on the value here. Parnis is no slouch at all. Okay, finishing off with brand then. Guys, what have I given for brand? Right, Invicta, I've stated their controversies, right? Well known, but they've got their issues, you know, too many models, very weird MSRP type of strategy, you know, giving $600 for just because of a two-tone watch when you can actually still buy it for 70. That's a bit odd. Parnis, you know, I think it's pretty well recognized now. You know, almost everybody in the watch community will be aware of Parnis, if not own a couple of Parnis watches. So, you know, they're pretty well recognized, but they do have their issues. You know, previously they were known very much for copying Panerai designs. In fact, the name, you know, has a lot of letters that kind of ape Panerai. Parnis, Panerai, it kind of looks about the same in terms of sizing. You know, that's the controversy that they started with. But they, you know, I think are starting to put out quality pieces and some designs which are a bit more original, including this particular diver. So 7 out of 10 as well for Parnis. I've given them the same mark for brand. You know, I can't separate them in my mind in terms of what I know. Okay, guys, that's the review then, the comparison here. What is the final mark? Very, very close, right? A slight nod to the Invicta just by 2 marks. So in conclusion, I think Panerai has produced a very compelling value dive watch with, you know, pretty good case design, a great dial, really like that dial, and they've given some better materials in terms of sapphire and ceramic, you know, those couple of components. Parnis equals the Invicta in this case, in my comparison here, for the case design, for the bezel, for the style overall, and the performance being a 200-meter diver. You know, it is no slouch at all. It's done pretty well. But, you know, I've given the nod today, again, to the Invicta. This remains one of the very best sub $100 pieces you can get. You know, that's really what I think about this. It does have a better movement. I think the Bracelet is objectively superior in terms of the fit and finish. Overall quality and finishing, I think, is also still better. And the value, at $30 less than the Parnis, I think I have to give the value to the Invicta. So there you go, guys, the comparison between Invicta 40mm Pro Diver versus the Parnis PA6007 model. Guys, very interested to hear your thoughts about this comparison. Let me know what you think if you have either of these watches, especially if you have both of these watches. You know, really like to hear what you think. So guys, if you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. New content every week, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for sticking with me, and as always, I'll catch you guys again next time.